Hi everyone, welcome to the first video that I'm finally getting around to posting on my channel. I've made, I'd say probably about 4 or 5 videos over the past several months and just for whatever reason could not get around to posting them. Either I wound up not liking them later or I couldn't edit them as well as I wanted to, which you'll be able to figure out why as I go further into what this video is actually about. But last night I saw a post on Instagram that really made me want to make a response that I knew would be probably a novel if I tried to type it out either on Instagram or Facebook. So I was like, why not finally get around to starting my YouTube channel that I've been wanting to do for so long and actually make a video where I could probably share a lot more of what I was actually feeling and thinking when I saw this post versus trying to type it all out on my phone. So, anyway, let's get into it. The post that I saw was by one of my favorite artists, probably of all time, who goes by the name Nychos. He's famous for making murals and graffiti all over the world. Most of his pieces show the anatomy of everything from the human body to animals to cartoon characters, just basically anything you can think of. And I've been following his work for a long time and had never really seen, I guess, any personal posts that he'd made. I'm not honestly the best fan, I guess, when it comes to artists and musicians that I like. I don't really pay too much attention, but I hadn't really, whenever I had, checked in, I hadn't seen anything like this until last night. And I just could relate to so much of what he was saying that I just felt compelled to finally start sharing my story and just, I guess, opening up. So the post that I'll be reading shows a man kind of curled up in a ball with, his skeleton and muscles and everything showing, and which is the Nychos style. And the post was entitled Depression. And this is what it said. The story begins with the sudden emerge of indefinable health issues. I've seen countless doctors, but none of them could help me. Out of my despair, I developed a depression, something unknown to me, since until then I always knew how to pull myself out of darkness. Soon I found out that these terms are not synonyms. The weird things happening in my body started to have mental effects, and suddenly I understood why people are depressed. Confusion and emptiness took over. Little did I know that my suffering would be the first step to something greater than myself. So, the parts that really resonate with me, well, there's a lot of this that resonates with me, so I guess I'll work my way to the one that really means the most. Um, just to give you guys a quick background story, for the past several years, I had been struggling with this muscle condition that basically was causing these really severe cramps and spasms that would last 24/7. Like, basically, whenever you go for a run or lifting weights, you can feel, your muscle just contracting and relaxing. And in my case, when that muscle would contract, it would stick. And it would stay like that for hours and hours before finally relaxing, if I was lucky. Sometimes it would take even longer. It would take until the next day for it to finally go back to, I guess, its neutral state. And I saw several doctors and did everything from MRIs to CAT scans, saw a neurologist, saw a sports physician, you know, and none of them could really pinpoint what the issue was. And I was told everything from it could be a nerve issue, which, a lot of the tests were coming back negative, so we were concluding that's not it, to some doctors telling me that it was just anxiety and all in my head, which I knew for a fact wasn't, because part of what took me so long to finally start seeing an actual doctor was me telling myself that the situation wasn't that bad, or I was just like imagining it, or just any number of things to just kind of brush off the reality of the situation. And then finally, after going through this stage for I think about, let's say, probably about like 4 or 5 years, I was able to come to my own conclusion that it was a result of just severe muscle damage that I did as a result of just working far too much and not giving myself the rest and breaks and sleep that I needed. And not only that, but when I was struggling with depression and anxiety at its worst, which was back in, I would say, probably 2010. That's when I was a freshman in college, just to kind of give you guys an timeline idea. I One of my main outlets before I really got into creating artwork was to go for really long walks, sometimes just for hours and hours, and I just wouldn't stop. Like, even if my legs were screaming at me, I would just keep going. And it got to the point where, I noticed that I was developing like these really severe muscle cramps and these just horrible spasms that were just around the clock, to the point where I almost like couldn't really get any sleep. I definitely couldn't really walk anywhere. I couldn't be on my feet for sometimes more than just a few minutes. That's how bad things got. And I would have to wear compression sleeves, and at one point brace, to actually even be able to go just the shortest distances. And it started affecting my arms as well later on in college, when it was about, I think, 2014 to 2015 is when I started noticing it, because at the time I had two part-time jobs, and it was also an art major where I had basically these classes called studios, where you would work in whatever medium that class was based around for about 3 hours straight, and you'd work for basically like an hour and a half, then you'd have a short break, and then you'd go back to creating again. And not only that, but I would be then going home to work on my projects outside of school, and then also creating my own artwork. So I basically just wasn't giving my arms any of the rest and recovery time that it needed. So they started becoming essentially like my legs. And then when I actually started doing art full time, I originally was looking at it as, this is a chance for me to actually be able to rest and get the rest that I needed, because at the time, or before that, I was working part time and was on my boss's schedule. But then, my hope was, working for myself, I'd be able to rest. Well, the problem is that I ended up working a lot more than I ever did at either of the jobs that I had before. And it got to the point where I was pushing myself so much, because I would have orders that I needed to fill, and my own pieces that I wanted to see finished. And I was working days from literally getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to not going to sleep until like 2 or 3 a.m. if I was lucky, sometimes even later than that. And then I guess because my brain was just in such this weird limbo, weird state, I can't even really describe it. The sleep that I got was not really sleep at all. It was like maybe a couple hours of rest, of just kind of tossing and turning, and then I just would give up and would just kind of start my day all over again. So that, combined with a really just shit diet of just mainly like, I guess, carbs and sugar and things like that, and almost no protein, um, I just wound up wearing my body down more and more and more, to the point where my arms actually started going from hurting and spasming and cramping all the time to actually going numb, particularly like in this area here. So basically, all of that being said, is after going through all of that, um, that is what kind of led to the stage of my journey that I've been on now. Because basically, after I realized what was going on, and I realized that I could do something to, help the state that I was in, I finally just had to sit down and rest. And that's something that was like kind of the hardest thing for me to do, because I'd always been someone to uh, get up and go and be working or creating or something, from morning till night, to basically have no choice but to sit and watch Netflix and YouTube all day, which I know to some people sounds like a dream, but to me that was essentially torture. Especially because while I was sitting there, I was also just in excruciating pain and numbness, and just this weird just mix that just started to mess with me mentally over time, especially because I basically went from being a really independent person to depending on people for almost everything. Uh, Everything from just helping me carry things to opening things to just the smallest things that you would never even think about. And one of the things that, just kind of going back to what Nychos was saying, where he could kind of feel like his mental and physical state were not, um, I can't really think of the word, that they weren't, I guess they weren't their own thing. They weren't independent of each other. They actually did start to kind of have an effect on each other. I could relate to that immensely. Like, I said earlier in this video that I struggle with depression and anxiety, but luckily I eventually, broke down and went to therapy for a few years, and was also on a couple different medications, and got to the point where, I was doing well enough that I didn't have to do either of those things anymore, only to be put back into the state physically that was just almost an everyday battle to fight off that darkness that I had spent so long escaping from. Like, there were so many days when I just wanted to just say fuck it. I just wanted to quit. I wanted to quit life. I wanted to quit everything that I was going through, because I was just thinking to myself, what if I never get better? What if I'm never able to create again? What if I'm never able to live an independent life, even just like a fraction of the independence that I had before? You know, because at the time I literally couldn't move, and I couldn't do anything but just kind of sit there and accept whatever was happening around me. I couldn't, if I had an itch, I couldn't scratch it. That, and I'm not even trying to be metaphorical. Like, literally, if I felt itchy, I would just have to just kind of deal with it, because I couldn't move. Moving could disrupt, whatever cramp in my arm is finally starting to relax, and so I just had to deal with it. And so, because also it just took so long to finally start to see progress and results, it was just, that was probably one of the harder parts, because I was just dealing with just so much anxiety of just wondering, what was going to happen to me in the future, and if I had basically screwed myself over for the rest of my life because of these stupid decisions that I'd done, that I'd put myself through for the past like number of years. And it wasn't until I started to heal and started to kind of try to look at things from a bigger perspective and try to see the bigger picture of the situation that I was kind of finally able to find some peace. Now, I will say that even though I started like entertaining that mentality, it wasn't an easy one to hold on to. Like, for me, it was a lot easier to slip into that spiral, that cycle of just wondering, like, when is this going to be over? Am I ever going to get better? Am I ever going to be my old self again? Um, and just being so frustrated that I wanted to just end it and, you know, take my own life, because I was tired of being a burden to other people. I was tired of having to depend on other people to help me with everything, after I just spent so long building up that independence for myself. And there were only small moments where I started to kind of break myself out of that, either because of, a friend of mine that I would just start talking to. Sometimes not even about that. Honestly, like, even just having a casual conversation with someone can break you out of that mentality once you start thinking, even if you're not even talking about how you're feeling, just talking about, you know, the weather or any like simple thing, I found just helped a lot. And it wasn't until I guess I started focusing more on just trying to like be present and also hang on to that hope that I started to, I guess, feel better like mentally. And not only that, but to focus on just the smallest little bit of progress that I was making, which is something that's really hard to do when, say, your entire body is screaming in pain except for like maybe a few fingers on your hand. But focusing on the fact that those three fingers are feeling better today, and I feel a little bit stronger than I did, yesterday or whatever, and trying to use my mental strength to focus on that and to realize that I am healing, even though it's taking a really long time and it feels like it's never going to end. Um, that was that that little spark of hope was just kind of enough to help keep me going and push me to the place that I'm at currently. And just to kind of give you a quick little update after those several months of just sitting and not being able to do anything, I was finally able to rest well enough that I could find a job this February, which is 2020, in case someone's watching this, you know, future in the future, and one that I can actually still rest and still get paid basically because the workload isn't anything that's too strenuous, and also does help me like I guess build more physical independence because I am still doing some physical stuff, but just not nearly like the kind of things that I did in the past when I worked at cafes and restaurants and moved artwork and things like that and books and all kinds of stuff because I worked in a library too for a little bit. And now that I've been seeing more and more of that progress with my healing and everything, it's just been kind of helping to keep me in that stable mentality that was slipping away. And even though there are definitely days where I just kind of wonder, again, am I ever going to feel better? Is this ever going to be officially over? Um, it's easier for me to kind of snap back and focus on just how much progress that I've made because honestly, like during the worst of it, my entire body was essentially covered in compression bandages. Like my everything from like my shoulders to my wrist were wrapped in compression bandages. I wore compression gloves and braces on top of that. And I also had to wear compression sleeves on my calves as well because that's where the majority of my spasms and cramps are happening. And now I'm at the point where I don't really have to wear any of it. Like there's still some days where I have to wear my gloves or I have to wrap up like my arms a little bit, but compared to the past where I had to wear them 24/7 from even when I was sleeping, I've just I've made so much progress. And like I said, even though there are days where it's hard to kind of to focus on that and realize that it's something that has become a little bit easier just now that I've made it through the worst of it. And I just kind of wanted to say for anyone who might be in a similar spot, whether you're working through some kind of physical suffering or mental, that you should be patient with yourself and realize how far you've come on your journey. Even if it doesn't feel like you've moved more than a centimeter from where you've been, that still matters a lot. And it's a mentality that is hard as hell to hold on to. And like I've said before, it's something that I still struggle with, to this day when I just get really frustrated with, the progress that I've made and I want to like heal faster and faster and be back to my peak physical self, by tomorrow. Um, that being in that mentality is what ultimately leads to me falling into depression again and feeling like things will never get better instead of realizing that, before I was at this point and now I'm here has helped me so much, even if I've realized that it's just been, like I said, just moving a centimeter, moving forward an inch, that's still something. And I also wanted to add that it's important to not see the days that you do feel down or worse as setbacks. Because, like, let me tell you, during those, like, several months before I was actually able to start moving again, there was still part of me that was really stubborn and wanted to still try to paint or still try to make things, or just, not focus on where I needed to be to actually help myself, because I was stubborn, Um, and it wound up setting me back a lot as far as, like, healing and everything. And would add, another week or two or month or two or whatever onto my, like, healing time. And even though those moments feel like setbacks, you can still gain something from that. And for me, it was just learning that I needed to be more patient with myself and focus on the present and not so much at where I want to be, because focusing on where I wanted to be was what was causing me to not just sit and let myself heal. It was instead pushing me to feel like, I was getting left behind, or that I wasn't at the point that I needed to be at or that I wanted to be at, instead of realizing in this moment of time, I'm where I'm meant to be, and I need to focus on doing what I can in this moment to help myself, and just not worry about the future, not worry about where I want to be, just focus on where I am now. And as long as, every day I'm doing what's best for me in that moment and on that day, that's what's most important. And like I was saying before, it's very hard to stick to that mentality, and there will be moments where you'll feel like you've fallen back, but it's all part of this process. It's this whole, just part of the cycle of just growth and, becoming whoever it is that you're meant to be. And before I let this video go on for too long, because I can already see we're coming up on the 30-minute mark, and I can guarantee this video is probably not going to get more than like 5 views anyway. um, which I do appreciate, just so you know, because, I mean, hey, whoever needs to see this is going to see it regardless. Um, but the part that I wanted to reread from Nychos' post is where he says, "Little did I know that my suffering would be the first step to something greater than myself." And I will say that I am someone who is not only hopeful for that, but also believes that, even if, I never go on to make any kind of impact, but besides just giving one person some hope who needs it, I like to think that we go through these stages of our lives for a reason. And I've come to this conclusion mainly because there have just been so many just situations where, and just coincidences, synchronicities, whatever you want to call them, where I've just realized that there is, I guess, like an order. It's not really the word I want to use, but I guess an order or a pattern, something out there that's pulling the strings, and everything is just falling into place like when it's meant to be. And even though there are times where you want to rush it, there is a reason for why it is that things are taking their time, and why some things happen and some things don't happen the way you want them to. And I've seen just, I've had just enough happen to me that I've realized that even in moments where I don't want to, because whatever I'm going through is just absolutely terrible. And, but I've realized that there is some reason behind it, even if I never know what it is, or never actually see it myself, but maybe somebody else does. And just to kind of leave you on a bit of a hopeful note, and just to kind of relate to what I was just saying, for example, when I was working a lot and pushing myself to these crazy limits, I missed out on so many opportunities to just spend time with my friends and get to know them, go to things that I was like invited to. And not only that, but I missed out on lots of opportunities to just learn more about myself and think other things that I wanted to do besides my work, because everything in my mind was just focused on my work, getting my work done, getting my art done, all of that. And I would always choose that over almost anything else. that I was presented. And during this time off, I've not only gotten to know so many of my friends better, but I've also met more like new people that I probably never would have even talked to or really developed such a deep connection with. And I've also been able to just discover more things that I like, things that I want to do, and as a result as well, like those wanting to be able to do those things someday has also helped me just focus on healing, which has helped me to focus on taking each day one step at a time and making sure that what I'm doing that day and in that moment is helping me, and focusing on my healing and not so much on where I want to be, but just where I am now and just my overall viewpoint of the situation. And so my hope is that whenever I get out of this stage, which will hopefully be soon, but you never know because life's unpredictable. I could wake up tomorrow completely healed, or I could wake up tomorrow being like in an even worse physical state than I am right now. But either way, whenever I've just made it through this stage, um, I can look back now and say that I did gain something from it, which has taken me so long to actually come to those terms because I just went through so many stages of just anger and anxiety and depression and just wondering why all of this was happening. And to finally come to a place where I realized that there were some pros amongst all the cons is honestly just pretty crazy to think about. So, yeah, I'm going to quit rambling now and conclude this video. And if you would like to subscribe, feel free to. I don't know how often I'll be posting to this channel because, some things are kind of still up in the air, and I'm also in the process of moving. But I would like to actually start regularly posting this year, and I'm just going to say in this video as just kind of a promise to myself that I will be posting again. I can't exactly say when, but if you would like to stick around and maybe hear more about my journey or just some other things that I've learned along the way, feel free to come along with me. And also, if you would like to, I would really like to hear your story if you've been in a similar spot. So feel free to leave a comment and I will get back to you. All right. Have a good one.